Imagine this. You steal a loaf of bread, or worse, you hurt someone. Today, there's a whole system waiting for you. Police, a courtroom, a jail cell with a number on the door. But for most of human history, none of that existed. No police, no prisons, no lawyers. So what actually happened to you? Who decided your fate? And how brutal, or surprisingly fair, was the answer? Let's go back and find out. Before kings, before courts, before anything resembling a legal system, small human groups handled wrongdoing the only way they could, personally. If you wronged someone in a hunter-gatherer band, there was no judge to appeal to. The people around you, your family, your camp, were the entire justice system. Punishment ranged from public shaming and being forced to make things right directly with the person you wronged, all the way up to banishment, being cast out of the group entirely. And banishment wasn't a slap on the wrist. In a world with no fences, no property, and predators around every fire's edge, being kicked out of your group could be close to a death sentence. You lost your protection, your food-sharing network, everything that kept you alive. For serious harm, like killing someone, many early societies operated on a principle anthropologists call the blood feud. If you killed someone, their family had the right and often the obligation to kill you or someone from your family back. This sounds chaotic, but it usually wasn't random revenge. It followed known, expected rules, almost like an unwritten code everyone understood. Somewhere around 1750 BCE, one of the earliest known legal codes was carved into a stone pillar in ancient Babylon, the Code of Hammurabi. It laid out in painstaking detail exactly what should happen if you did something wrong. And the punishments were famously proportional. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But here's the detail people miss. The punishment often depended heavily on your social status. A crime against a wealthy or high-status person could mean a far harsher penalty than the same crime against someone poor. Justice, even 3,700 years ago, wasn't blind. Ancient Rome developed its own layered system. Minor offenses might mean fines or public humiliation, while serious crimes could mean exile, forced labor in mines, or execution, carried out in dramatically public ways, often as spectacle, meant to be watched by the whole city. That's a theme that shows up again and again across history. Punishment wasn't just about the wrongdoer. It was theater, aimed at everyone watching. Fast forward to medieval Europe, and things get stranger. If evidence was unclear, some societies didn't rely on witnesses or investigation at all. They used what's called trial by ordeal. Here's how it worked. The accused might be forced to carry a red-hot iron bar a certain distance, or plunge their hand into boiling water to retrieve a stone. Then their wound would be bandaged and checked a few days later. If it was healing cleanly, they were judged innocent. The reasoning being that God had protected them. If it festered, they were guilty. Another version, the accused was bound and thrown into water. If they sank, they were considered innocent, and ideally pulled out in time. If they floated, that was taken as a sign the water, a pure element, was rejecting them, meaning they were guilty. It's easy to look at this now and see it as superstition, but at the time, it reflected a genuine belief that divine forces would intervene to reveal the truth, in a world with no forensic science and no reliable way to cross-examine evidence. For most of history, punishment didn't happen behind closed doors. It happened in the town square, in front of everyone. Stocks and pillories were common across medieval and early modern Europe. Wooden frames that locked a person's head and hands in place in a public space, where passersby could jeer, throw rotten food, or worse. The goal wasn't just to punish the individual, it was to publicly mark them as someone who had broken the community's rules, and to deter anyone else watching. Public whippings, brandings, literally burning a letter into someone's skin to mark them as a thief or worse. And executions by hanging were common sights in town centers well into the 1700s and 1800s in many parts of the world. Executions in particular often drew massive crowds, sometimes treated almost like public events, with vendors selling food nearby. This wasn't unique to Europe. Many cultures across history, from parts of East Asia to the Middle East to the Americas, developed their own versions of public corporal punishment and execution, often for similar reasons. Swift, visible consequences meant to keep entire communities in line in a world without the infrastructure to monitor people quietly or privately. Here's the twist. Prisons, as we think of them today, buildings designed specifically to hold people for extended periods as their punishment, are a surprisingly recent invention. For most of history, jails existed. but they were typically just holding cells, places to keep someone briefly before their real punishment, a fine, corporal punishment, exile, or execution, was carried out. Nobody was sentenced to 5 years in prison the way we understand it now. That changed significantly in the late 1700s and into the 1800s, driven partly by reform movements, including Quaker reformers in places like Philadelphia, who argued that punishment should aim to reform a person's character, not just physically hurt or publicly shame them. This led to the design of the modern penitentiary, a word that literally comes from penitence, the idea being that isolation and reflection would lead a wrongdoer to repent. Early versions of this were brutal in their own way. Some of the first penitentiaries kept prisoners in near total isolation and silence for years, based on a theory that quiet reflection would reform them. In practice, it often caused severe psychological harm instead. So who decided your punishment across most of human history? Often, it wasn't a judge or a formal system at all. It was your community, a king's decree carved in stone, an ordeal meant to let fate or faith decide, or a public square full of onlookers. The modern idea of a private cell, a fixed sentence, and a system built around rehabilitation is, in the scope of human history, almost brand new. For thousands of years before that, justice was loud, public, and deeply tied to whoever held power in the room or in the crowd.